Today we have Kenny Riedmann on the podcast. Kenny is one of my best buddies. He was a groomsman in my wedding. We've lived together on and off over the years. He's a shredder of all disciplines. He's a former pro motorcycle racer, snowboard raced at a very high level, and we met racing go-karts, so he does it all. You're going to enjoy this podcast. Cheers.
Cheers.
You're on. You're finally a guest.
Oh, wow. Thanks for having me.
No worries, dude. How was the drive down?
Yeah, pretty uneventful. Just have to keep the window open at all times so Frank can keep his head out the window. Gets a little cold.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And then, so you're saying you dropped him off at your parents' and your dad's now got a race shop again.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, so he's
got the
just
Radical.
loving working on that Radical.
Is it going to go any faster this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. We took it all apart and did some measuring, and it's a little bit bent, so we're going to get it straightened out, and it should handle a bit better next year.
At least it's square now?
Yeah, like close enough. Closer.
Yeah, I guess you don't have to make sure bikes are square. I guess you just have to make sure they're straight.
Yeah.
True. Huh. So you enjoyed Kyle's podcast?
Yeah, that was great. It was really cool to see because I raced against him in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started racing bikes, I didn't really pay attention to his career path at all. And it was just like a bunch of years later, I saw that he was racing in IMSA, doing really well. And it was just cool to listen to the podcast and kind of fill in the gaps.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny like how racing is like you have to self-promote a lot, but never are you telling your whole story. Like unless you're really sitting down with a guy, it's always like, "Oh, how did he get that ride? Oh, wow, look, he's done that. Good for him," or whatever, but you never really hear about it. Yeah,
and it seems like he really bet big on himself in a few different occasions. Like we're talking big money for a 18, 19-year-old kid.
Yeah,
chasing a dream.
I bought him the race car.
Yeah. Like that's pretty ballsy. So,
yeah.
Just watching him race IMSA, I was like, oh, maybe he just bought a ride. Like I didn't know how much money he had, or, maybe he was just lucky. But no, it's cool to see how hard he worked to get where he is.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. So, start back at the beginning of your racing career.
Yeah.
Were you born at, because your parents always lived at the Caledon Ski Hill. Is that where you grew up?
Yeah.
Fully? So was your first racing, like snowboard racing or something?
Yeah. So obviously growing up right at the ski hill, I was snowboarding all the time and did some border cross racing, some GS racing. Also did a bit of park, a little bit of everything from, when I was I started snowboarding at 4 and I was competing in the club championships at 6 years old kind of thing.
Right. So that was your first taste of racing.
Yeah.
Did it seem like racing? Like now looking back on it, it was like you were really competitive, like you wanted to win kind of thing?
I'd say when I was around probably 12 years old is when it started to really seem like racing. Because up until then, I was just my dad was taking me events. I was going around the gates and having fun, but I didn't really have a drive. And then once I was a bit older, I was like, okay, this is racing, but I had also started racing go-karts at that time too. So I think the starting to race go-karts just turned into a mentality for racing all the way across the board.
How did racing go-karts come about?
So I always rode dirt bikes as a kid.
Yeah.
And I did a handful of dirt bike races from when I was 5, 6, 7 years old.
Oh, okay. On 50s or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So on a JR 50 at first and then.
Oh, like a real little 50.
Little 50. And then we got a KTM 50. And my mom didn't like the motocross scene too much.
Fair enough.
She put her foot down on that one.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you would have just raced bikes if your mom didn't put her foot down?
I think so, yeah. But in one of my first races, I crashed and it was on 50s, so we weren't going too fast, but I got my helmet stuck in the sand and I got landed on by someone coming over the next jump. My mom saw it and she kind of lost it and put an end to that. And then my dad showed up, brought a go-kart home when I was 9 or 10, I think.
So, yeah, 9 or 10, okay, yeah. And you guys went to Sutton?
We went to Innisfil first, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so we started at Innisfil.
And then, so that progressed, like, was that like a full season right away?
No.
Okay.
That was like the odd practice day, the odd race here and there, and then probably 2 years of just doing random races. And then when we wanted to take it, well, more seriously, I was still like a 11, 12-year-old kid.
Yeah.
But then we went to Sutton and started doing the full championship.
Yeah. Well, because when I first ever encountered you go-karting, it was like, oh, this guy's dead serious. He's racing an 80, like he's got the Burrell suit, like it looked pretty legit.
Yeah. By the time we were in the shifter cart, it was, we were racing.
Yeah.
And that was the goal. And we were doing like the full Sutton Championship, like Simcoe Kart Club, and then the full Ron Fellows Championship, and we were dabbling in some WKA and Stars of Karting races. Like every weekend we were going somewhere.
Right. So did you, was that kind of like your dad, knowing you and knowing your dad, like your dad's pretty keen, but was that driven by like, oh shit, Kenny's fast, like he's won some races, like let's,
I don't even think that's what really like fueled the drive for my dad. My dad just, he loves working on the go-karts. He loves being at the racetrack, shooting the shit, making friends at the racetrack. And it's more so the lifestyle for him. And then just because we did it so often and he always had me in good equipment, then the pace started coming. So
Okay.
I wouldn't say I was like a natural talent when I first got in a go-kart by any means.
Right. And then, man, like I remember showing up to that. Well, I was telling Kyle, like my first Ron Fellows race was that 2005 Barrie Grand Prix. And I remember showing up and it felt like a big deal, but I could only imagine you going down and doing those WKA races would have been like a big stage.
Yeah. The difference was like Barrie Grand Prix was my favorite race every year.
Yeah.
Because the track was unbelievable, the spectators that it brought out, and it was local. So we knew everyone there, family would come, and that was probably the biggest race that we would go to every year. When we went to the WKA races, like I was nowhere near as competitive as I was up in Canada. So it was like, it was great. We had a lot of fun doing it, but I was never like competitive down there.
Like to win.
Yeah. So like, if I got a top 10, I was like, over the moon. I was so happy. Whereas when we showed up to Barrie, we showed up being like, we want to win this race.
Right. Yeah, so that race that we were talking about with Kyle, that championship, you won the first race of that season at Sutton. And then where did you finish in the championship against Mercelli?
I think I got third in the championship.
Okay.
I probably should have checked this out before coming on your podcast, but it was Marcelli won, I think, and then I think it was Pelletier that got second.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure I was in third.
You beat Ostella and Vinsec.
Oh, I don't know if I ever beat Vinsec.
True.
Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was fifth or sixth. I don't know. I had a couple of good races. I know that.
So that takes you till, I don't know, whatever, 14 or 15 or something, and you run. Tell me about your dad's history, though. Like, why? Because why you would have jumped to bikes and why that would eventually happen.
Yeah, so my dad started racing motorcycles when he was 24. He only raced for like 4 or 5 years, but he was really talented, and he had quite a bit of success in those years. And the only reason why he stopped racing is because he had he raced 250 GP bikes. So it's like 2 strokes, purpose built for racing.
In the 70s?
In the like 82, 83, 84.
Right, 80s, yeah.
And so he was a GP bike guy, and there's like 2 different worlds, like GP bikes, which is purpose built race bikes, and then production bikes, which is like your modern day superbike, but back then they were a lot shittier.
Right.
And so he had good success on the 250, and he was trying to make a jump to a 500cc Grand Prix bike, which is like what the equivalent of like MotoGP now, but a 2-stroke.
Full on.
Like not in the World Championships.
But racing those bikes.
But racing those bikes, which is, expensive bike, hard to run, more tires, yada, yada, yada. And the deal for this 500 he was supposed to race fell through, and he just threw in the towel. He said, if I can't make it to that next step, I don't want to do it anymore. And he did some sidecar racing after that. And
sidecar racing.
Yeah, so a friend of his like built a sidecar, and they competed in the AMA championships. And my dad was the monkey, the passenger on the sidecar.
So AMA had a sidecar championship?
Yeah.
They don't anymore, do they?
No, not
okay.
anymore in the AMA. There's still some sidecar racing in Europe,
Yeah.
and like they race it at the Isle of Man and stuff like that. But it's not what it used to be. It used to be pretty popular in North America.
Huh. So he like had this love for racing motorcycles.
Racing anything, really.
Racing anything.
He had an opportunity to race motorcycles, and he took it. But you give that guy anything with a motor, and he wants to race it.
Okay. So, yeah, so jump back to your 15 or 16. You raced one season of 125 shifter in a go-kart?
Yeah, I raced one season of 125 shifter and senior Rotax at the same time, and that was also the same year that I did my first motorcycle race.
So how did that come about? Was it like, what kind of conversation was that like for you to go race, totally jump ship and race motorcycles?
So I saw a lot of the guys that I was racing go-karts with were getting opportunities to hop into a race car.
Yeah.
And that wasn't in the cards for me at the time. So I was kind of like seeing like my karting come to an end because, you know, I was 15, which seemed old in karting at the time.
Totally.
And I wasn't getting the opportunity to go into a car. And my dad bought a 125 GP bike and like just to go out and have fun, do some track days with. And we did one track day and then we went to a race the next weekend.
Yeah.
And it was kind of refreshing. Like I was kind of burnt out in the karting thing, and it was just so refreshing to go to a racetrack and being the young kid on a 125 and watching all these guys racing Pro 600 and Pro Superbike and being like, okay, this is like, I'm at the bottom of the ladder here and I can climb my way up, which in karting, I felt like I was kind of at the top, whether or not I was winning races. Like there was no more progression in terms of classes.
Yep.
Like obviously we weren't planning on going to Europe and race or anything like that, and wasn't getting into a car. So
yeah, that's cool. So, and I guess you guys probably did karting like that, but like you guys have always been like this kind of classic father-son team, which I think is one of the most competitive, type of teams in racing.
yeah,
You look at so many guys, right? It's them and their dad. So it was like starting fresh again on the 125 and kind of building up that knowledge. I guess a 120, I was going to ask how crazy it is to just hop on a motorcycle and go around a place like Mosport. Did it feel insane like the first time?
Not particularly, no. Like coming from a 125 shifter kart, they're so fast. And a 125 GP bike is top speed is quicker than a shifter kart, but stuff doesn't come at you as fast because like the tracks are bigger and you're slowing down more for the corners. So, and I think that was a big advantage when I first got on a bike is that
it felt slow.
It felt slow. So a lot of the natural progression to get into road racing was either like a flat track or motocross background. And all these guys were hopping on road race bikes, and it was faster than anything they've been on. Whereas when I hopped on it, it almost seemed like all the corners were coming at me in slow motion because shifter karts are just
insane.
Yeah.
Huh. So how'd you do that year in 125?
I think I got third in the amateur 125 championship.
Okay.
I think there was only like 4 or 5 guys in it, but whatever. I wasn't a natural right off the hop. It took a couple of years, and I felt like as I went from like 125 to a 250 to a 600, I kept getting better on like the bigger bike that I was on.
Okay. Why?
I wasn't a big corner speed guy.
Okay.
I was more point and shoot.
Yeah.
So
you could get in.
I could just like get in, park it, turn it, get on the gas. Same reason why I was a better shifter racer than I was a 4-stroke racer.
Sure. Okay. Huh. So I'm trying to figure out where you maybe you'll tell me, but where you get some like real success and confidence on the bike? When does that happen? When is it like, oh, like I've got the hang of this?
I'd say that was probably in so 2007 was my first year on a 125. 2008 I rode a 125 and a 250, and at the last national of the year I had an opportunity to hop on a 600 for the first time.
Okay.
And that was like, at the time the amateur grid was huge for the Canadian nationals, and like they would send riders home after qualifying that wouldn't make the grid, and I managed to get a top 10 in that race. And that was when it kind of clicked. I was like I'm pretty quick at this. And then the following year I did a full season of amateur 600.
Right. And how'd you do there?
I finished third in the Shannonville Regional Championship, and I won a couple races. I broke the long track record at Shannonville. I still hold that record from 2009.
Nice.
The track is so bumpy now. I don't think anyone could beat it.
Yep.
And then at the end of 2009, the very last race of the year, I was like, the points where I couldn't get second, and I don't think fourth could catch me. So I moved up to pro at the end of 2009.
Okay. Do you remember your last go-kart race?
Barry?
No. Do you remember Shannonville?
Oh, when I came back in the Honda. Yeah, I do. That was, I think that was a couple years after I had stopped karting completely.
Yeah, and you came back and did the one big race at Shannonville.
Yeah.
And you were, I think I was starting the final in like second place, and you had crashed or something, and you were starting in like 20th. And right before the green flag, we went to the washroom and changed suits and helmets. So everyone thought we had switched go-karts,
Yeah.
and everyone was freaking out the whole race, like waving at us.
Yeah. I don't think I crashed. I think I was just slow, but
Fair enough.
yeah, that was funny.
Yeah. That was I guess we were probably already friends at that time. Like, we weren't friends during proper go-kart racing.
No, we didn't talk when we were racing karts against each other. Not that we raced against each other that often. But it wasn't till Aaron DeHuse invited me to your house to go snowboarding in your backyard.
Yeah, it was skiing and snowboarding.
It was skiing and snowboarding that really started our friendship.
And you were a year older, so you had a pickup truck.
Yeah.
And a fake ID.
Yeah.
So that helped. I wasn't driving it.
Yeah. We'd drive down to the hockey arena in Milton, shovel a bunch of snow into the back of the truck, and good times.
Yeah. So then again, I don't think I really paid too much attention to your motorcycle career here until you told me, like, hey, I'm moving to Alabama to go race for this team and like go and be a pro motorcycle racer. Yeah. How did that deal come about, or how did that like?
So I was doing like the odd pro race up in Canada. Never did the full season because it just made more sense to go down to the States and do the odd race here and there that was closer than driving out to Calgary for the full Canadian season. So we never went after a full championship. So like 2010, I did a handful of races in Canada. 2011, I did a few in Canada, a few in the States, and then I did a bunch more in the States in 2012. And that was just me and my dad working on the bikes. We had a little bit of help from Triumph Motorcycles at the time because no one was racing a Triumph. And one of my dad's buddies, Chris Ellis, was like the rep for Triumph in Canada, so he was getting us bikes.
Okay.
And how the whole deal in the States came about for like the proper Triumph race program was in 2012. Triumph sponsored a rider rather in the States full-time, Jason DeSalvo, and the guys that were building his bikes and running them at the track, they had a lot of issues mechanically. And because we had been racing the Triumph since 2009, between my dad and John Cornwell, who was helping us out a lot, they kind of developed the bike. And so we had a pretty good setup. And the Triumph was a lot different than the typical Japanese inline 4-cylinders that we were racing against. So they were pretty quirky, and we had a good handle on it. And it was 4 or 5 races left in the season in 2012, and Triumph Motorcycles and Jason DeSalvo approached us about Jason riding my bikes for the remainder of the season because they weren't happy with who was building theirs. So then before you know it, me and my dad were building bikes for essentially a factory Triumph effort. And we were like, whoa, didn't really know what we were doing.
Yeah.
And then they offered me a deal to race 2013 and 2014 2-year contract for them.
And what was that? What's that series called? Like
At the time, it was AMA.
Yeah.
Which is like the equivalent of what's now Moto America, just different people running it.
Right. So you guys had developed the Triumph. They had obviously seen you ride, and they wanted, for the next year going forward, you to be this guy's teammate.
Yeah.
Okay. And race the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that like? Was that kind of a moment where it was like, oh, I'm a pro racer now for this summer at least?
Yeah. It was definitely surreal. I had done like 2 half seasons down there, and I kind of knew that I was never going to be a dude to win races down there.
Okay.
Because I was on good equipment, and my goal was always a top 10. I was like 15th to 20th place guy. And I knew no matter what ride I got, I wasn't all of a sudden going to be this famous pro racer dude. But I got the opportunity, and of course I was going to take it.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of fun those years down racing.
So you bought a house in Alabama.
Yeah, my dad bought a house in Alabama
for like 90 grand or something.
It was 130,000.
Okay.
Because
so nice joint.
Oh, real nice joint. Gated community. We had a pool. It was sweet. But no, because we were looking at places to rent down there.
Yeah.
And everything was like $2,500 a month, $3,000 a month. You look at it for buying, it's like 130 grand. And then I lived down there for 1 year. Was supposed to be 2. I ended up just living down there the 1 year and rented it out to one of my teammates the second year, and like sold it for like 145. So
how many races was that season, or those seasons?
Between 7 and 9 rounds.
Okay. So, and where in Alabama?
We were like 5 miles away from Barber Motorsports Park.
So that was the idea. You'd test at Barber.
Yeah. Well, so the Jason DeSalvo, who like Triumph had a lot of faith in him, and like the whole program was kind of behind him more so than any team.
Sure.
He was already situated in Alabama, and him and his wife lived down there. And they hired me and Elena Myers to be his teammate. Elena lived in California, I lived in Canada, and they just brought us all down to Alabama so that we could all train together. And we just rode bicycles, rode dirt bikes, flat track bikes, and
yeah, that's something that's so different in racing bikes is like, oh, you actually have to train. Like, you can't just be some guy with a gut and be fast, and like you have to be lean because you're on no horsepower compared to a car. Mm-hmm. You've got to figure out how to be in an aero position, and you've got to actually manhandle the bike around a little bit. So did you start cycling down there, or did you cycle beforehand for training?
I rode a bicycle beforehand for training, but it wasn't until I moved down there that like Triumph bought me like a proper carbon fiber road bike with clip-in pedals, and I really started to like take cycling pretty seriously.
Did you get hooked on cycling a little bit? Like I'm hooked on cycling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was like, it was insane because it was my only job to do during the week was to stay in shape for the races.
Right.
So we were cycling like 5-6 days a week, and Triumph hired a trainer for us, and her boyfriend was a really good cyclist. Like he raced for a team down in Alabama. Now he lives in Utah now. I think he races for a team over there. But anyways, really good cyclist. And I started riding with him a bunch. Jason and Elena would ride with our trainer, and I would ride with her boyfriend because we would go on.
Because you were quick?
I progressed pretty quickly on the cycling, and I was just like so gung-ho for it. And yeah, I got really into cycling. And we had mountain bikes too, and there were great mountain bike trails there. And yeah.
Huh. So you were living that, like, the full kind of pro life. Now it's funny, you know, so many people do things as amateurs, especially racing, like the majority of people. Same with golf and things like that, right? And there's a big difference between, you know, being an amateur and being a pro and living a pro lifestyle, you know? Did that increase your love for racing? Did it change kind of the way you looked at racing, like those years of, you know, that kind of maximum effort?
I mean, I think it probably should have. There probably should have been some sort of switch to be like, okay, like you have this opportunity, treat it as a job. But I was just so happy to be there. So I'm not sure if I really
just opening a beer. Right. Which is probably the way I would have felt too.
Yeah, like I was just enjoying the experience for what it was at the time, not really thinking about anything long term.
So it wasn't, so even going into that season, like, you know, you are a guy who's fully supported to go and do this. It wasn't like, hey, if I do really well, I'm going to be a pro race car driver and make my entire living doing that. Or race car driver, pro motorcycle racer.
Yeah, to a certain extent, like that was always there. But like there was a big difference between the guys that were winning and what I was doing. And I was like, of course, I trained my ass off and I put all my effort into racing. Like I used to crash my brains out trying to go faster. Like it's not like I ever didn't take it seriously or didn't try. I just kind of always knew that I was a little too far behind the 8 ball.
And do you think that was just starting racing so late?
Starting racing so late, also just racing Canadian tracks is so much different from the American tracks. It was really hard for me to learn the tracks down there. And like looking at all the guys that are even still racing in Moto America now and even in the World Championships, they're all guys that I raced against, but they have been racing in like on mini bikes on go-kart tracks when they were 9 years old together.
Right.
It's like a handful of the same guys that have been leading the sport, progressing all the way through. And to just like show up as a Canadian, never racing down there, I was like going out and I was like, I'm 5 seconds off the pace at these big races. And I'm like, I don't like, okay, yeah, I can go 2 seconds faster probably, but 5?
Right.
Like, I don't know if I got that. And I got closer, obviously, the more time I spent down there.
Yeah.
But it was like, I was nowhere near close to a contention for a win.
Because I remember during that time, you had crashed a decent amount and like, it's like, oh, I remember thinking like, this isn't safe. like you tell me about some of those crashes. Was that unnerving, or were you just one of those like wild men, like when you were little, that was like, yeah, whatever, I crash.
Crashes in the States never bothered me because the tracks, for the most part, had so much runoff that it wasn't like Mosport where you're going to go into a concrete wall if you go off the track. So when I was racing in the States, it was, you know, we had like 3 or 4 bikes. I could just go and wad it, just grab another one out of the trailer.
Right, because on a bike, you lay yourself down kind of gently and your bike is potentially totaled.
Yeah. Yeah, like you'll just bail off the bike. It'll go cartwheeling. And as long as you don't get, if you have like a crash in a weird spot and get run over, you can get hurt. And if you crash in a bad spot where you're going to run into a wall, you can get hurt. But like 99% of the time, it's just like being on a slip and slide.
Really?
Yeah.
What's your worst crash ever?
Like Most painful or scariest?
I don't know. Give me both.
The most painful one was actually in Laguna Sega, turn 3. So the first right-hander.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember exactly what happened because I hit my head. But I know my hand got caught under the handlebar, and that's the one that like tore my pinky all up.
Mm.
And it sounds weird, like being a motorcycle racer crashing all this time, but the pinky was the most painful injury that I ever had.
Just messing up your finger.
Just messing up the finger, because it was like a couple surgeries to get this thing.
Again, put that on camera.
But that was like the naggiest injury, because like hands are really important when you're racing a motorcycle.
Right. So getting your glove on, even.
Getting your glove on, and then after the first couple surgeries on it, it was just completely straight out. So I showed up to Daytona the following year after the crash with this pinky that I couldn't bend. And going down the straightaway, it's just like flapping.
It's just catching the air.
Yeah.
Like it's terrible for aero.
Yeah. So then I brought my handlebar in. When I got back home after Daytona, I brought my handlebar in.
To the doctor.
To the doctor. And had him go in and cut it apart and like fit it around the handlebar.
And bend it around.
Yeah.
So now that's why you're
now it's just
downforce
like
freaking pinky.
Yeah.
Wow. I remember you telling me that you high-sided into the wall in corner 9 at Mosport.
Yeah.
And you like split your helmet open and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Now, I wasn't injured at all really from that one. Concussion and whatever, but that one was that was like one of the weird crashes where you could get hurt because it happened because the oil spilt out on my back tire. And the transition from 8 to 9, it was like the oil collected in the belly pan of the bike, splashed on the rear tire, and it high-sided me. So that was one of the fluky weird ones, because a traditional crash in turn 9, you're not even going to make it to the wall probably.
Really?
Yeah.
Right. I guess you're already kind of slowed up.
You're already kind of slowed up by the apex, but because I crashed on the transition from 8 to 9, it was before I could get on the brakes for 9, so I had too much momentum, and I went into the wall. Bones. I think partly because of luck, partly because of strong bones, and partly just from learning how to crash at a young age.
Fair enough.
Shoulders were big for me, though.
Like just hurting shoulders?
Like dislocating, separating, like just my shoulders seem to give me the most issues nowadays from racing crashes.
I remember actually before this podcast, and I remember from when you were telling me, I was looking up you on YouTube, and there's this video of Jordy crashing so hard, and then you crashing right after him.
Yeah.
On the same lap around the, where was that, Calabogie or something?
That was Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia. That was a crazy one, because we were battling for the championship, and obviously Jody and I have been really good friends. He's one of my best friends. We were battling hard for the championship, and I was in the lead, he was in second, and he crashed out behind me on the first lap. I obviously didn't know he was behind me, and I crashed out the very next corner. Like, it was just
no pressure.
No pressure. Like, if I had just come around like 2 more turns, my team would have been there like waving, like, slow down, it's all good. No.
Yeah.
Didn't happen.
Push it hard.
Yeah.
That's great. Before we get too far, though, I want to jump back to this, like the snowboard racing and stuff, because you raced snowboards at a decently high level.
Yeah. So actually the first season that I raced pro on a 600 in Canada, 2010, I also went to Junior Worlds to represent Canada for border cross. And it was in New Zealand, so it was in our summer. And I remember having to like leave the superbike scene in Canada to go to New Zealand to represent Canada for a snowboard contest. And I was like kind of over the snowboard competition at that point. And I was like bummed that I had to go to New Zealand to go to Junior Worlds.
Really?
Yeah. And like, I remember even talking about like not going, and my dad was like, you have to go. Like, just to be able to say you did Junior Worlds, you have to go. And I'm glad I went now. But at the time, I remember being pissed that I had to, I don't even think I missed a race, but just, I don't know. I was just like, I'm a motorcycle racer now.
I don't do that snowboard shit. That's funny.
Yeah.
Huh. And how'd you do at Junior Worlds? Like, what would happen if you won Junior Worlds? So would you be on the Olympic team?
It's not like you win Junior Worlds and you get to the Olympic team, but it probably would have given me enough fist points to like probably be asked for it.
Huh.
I did not win.
Didn't even wax your board.
No. So it was because it was in the summer, and it was nationals that qualifies you for it. And I didn't do that well at nationals, so I was like, oh, I'm done snowboarding. I wasn't going to compete the following year. So I sold all my snowboards. And I didn't have any equipment. And then I found out that I got selected for Junior Worlds, which was in like August, I think. And I remember being like, okay. So I like borrowed a snowboard and a set of bindings from my buddy Tommy and just like flew to New Zealand with a borrowed board, different kind of snowboard, never ridden it before. And did not do well. I think I finished like 26th or 27th or something. It was embarrassing.
That's like, it's so funny. That's so foreign to people. Like you're clearly like, you know, you undersell yourself, but like you're clearly a talented guy to just be like, I'm not a snowboarder anymore, but while traveling to like the Junior Worlds to race. And then and you didn't do any more snowboard racing after that? That was it?
I did one FIS race like 2 years later, just on a whim at Big White. And I think it was actually the year that I ran into you and Ryan at Big White.
Oh, okay, yeah. But so whatever, 14 years ago.
Yeah. Forever ago now. Yeah. But yeah, I wasn't really interested in it at all at that point.
So to jump back to you being down in Alabama, how does that whole deal come to an end?
So Triumph, it was a time when a lot of manufacturers were not putting money into motorsports, like 2013, 2014.
And that's more what drove motorcycle racing.
It's always the manufacturers. There's very few out-of-industry sponsors.
Okay.
So a lot of manufacturers were pulling out, teams were folding. There wasn't a lot going on. And I think Triumph saw that as an opportunity to put a bunch of money into it because we'd potentially be more competitive.
Right.
So Triumph just sunk a bunch of money into it, 2013. And I remember we showed up to Daytona, which is the first round of the year in 2014. And it was a couple weeks after like Road Racing World Magazine, they gave the award of like CEO of the year within the industry to Greg Heichelbeck, who was CEO of Triumph Motorcycles.
Okay.
And we were like, oh yeah, like this is sick. Like Triumph's dumping all this money into racing. We got CEO of the year. Things are looking great. Not a month goes by, Greg gets fired.
Okay.
So he got let go because they were spending too much money on racing.
True.
And then, so as soon as he got fired, we still had basically a full season left. And we were thinking like, oh, like this is coming to an end.
Better not spend any of your own money or like, you know, overextend, like make sure the receipts are in.
Yeah. So what I ended up doing, because I knew they can continue to support racers, but at a much smaller scale. And we all kind of knew either the whole program was getting tanked or they were going to hang on to like one or two riders. I wasn't going to be the one or two riders in the States for them to hang on to. So I decided to race in Canada as well as the full season in the States.
Smart.
In 2014, because I figured if I win a championship in Canada, that's worth a bit more to a brand like Triumph than finishing 10th place overall in the States.
Right.
So I did the full AMA season and the full Canadian season in 2014, and there was only one conflicting race. And I remember skipping Laguna Seca to go out to Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia, which is it's a fun track. I'm not going to like knock on it, but it's no Laguna Seca.
Right. Shubenacadie.
It's the bumpiest track that like, it would be nice if it had walls. It doesn't even have walls. It just has trees lining the track. It's pretty gnarly.
Okay. And so you did well in that season in Canada?
Yeah, I ended up winning the championship after battling with Jody really hard through it. But Jody was also racing Superbike at the time, and Jody won the Superbike Championship that year. So that's where his focus was. And the 600 class wasn't as competitive. So got that championship, and then 2014's up. Everyone's contracts come to an end, and Triumph ends up supporting one rider in the States, and then they continue to support me just in Canada.
So in hindsight, it was a smart move.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it continued racing, but I didn't go back to the States. I did like 2 more races in the States after that, but not at the same capacity.
Right. And it's so funny, once you've done something at that level and then you say you come back to Canada, and it's still like, this dream level for most people, like racing a whole championship within your country with, factory support, yada, yada, yada. But it probably felt like a step back.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
It felt like I didn't make it. Because like to make it, I think like a stepping stone is you go down in the States and then you go to Europe.
Okay.
I went to the States and then back to Canada, and I was like, all right, well, I'm probably just going to race a few more years in Canada for fun and then call it quits after that.
Right. But you were still getting enough funding from Triumph. It was like, hey, let's go race this whole season.
Yeah, we still got good support.
Yeah.
It wasn't like what it was when I was racing in the States.
Right. Right. You weren't training full time 5 days a week. You were working.
No, I was working construction.
Yeah.
And yeah, so raced a few more seasons in Canada.
But then you did, because I remember it's probably a bunch of years ago now, but you did some pretty frickin' cool races. You did a couple like 24-hour races.
Yeah.
And I know nothing about endurance racing on a motorcycle. What were those races?
So I did the Bulldor 24-hour in 2015.
What's that?
So that's Circuit Paul Ricard. It's
in
part
France.
of in France. Yeah. It's part of the World Endurance Championship.
Okay.
And so it's like the biggest endurance race for motorcycles.
That's the biggest one.
That's the biggest
It's
one.
not Lemans or Daytona.
No.
Wow, okay.
No, it's the Bulldor is the big one.
Okay.
And yeah, that was actually, it's crazy how that came together. There's a guy, Harvey, grew up in France, moved to Quebec, and he was helping out some amateur riders in the Canadian Superbike series. And he doesn't speak a whole lot of English, broken English, and he was kind of like a crazy guy. Still is. Like, you'd go into his pits at like midnight the night before the race, and they've got like a disco ball going, speakers blasting, drinking beers while working on the bikes.
True.
Just wild situation. And so like I didn't know the guy or talk to him, and he comes over, and my crew chief Scott spoke a bit of French, and he was just like, yeah, we want you to come over and do this 24-hour World Endurance Championship race in France. I'm like, yeah, okay, bud.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't think he had any ties to any teams or whatever.
Right.
And then it came together. And at the end of the 2015 season, flew over to France to be an alternate rider.
Oh, like a backup rider.
Yeah.
Okay.
So every team has 4 riders, but only 3 start the race.
Got it.
So I went over as an alternate because one of their riders had a shoulder injury, broken collarbone, shoulder, something like that. And he was going to show up and ride, but they didn't know if he was going to be fit enough to do the race.
Oh, so you knew you had a good shot of riding.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew that there was a chance, but it wasn't set in stone. They were kind of waiting to see how well I would do.
Worst case scenario, you were partying in the pits, it sounded like.
24-hour party.
Right. Ready to race at any moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like how do you even wrap your head around like, yeah, I'm going to this track I've never been to go race potentially in the dark? Like,
I just went over
okay
and did it. I brought my crew chief Scott because he spoke French, and no one on the team or my other teammates spoke any English.
And you speak zero French.
And I speak zero French.
Yeah.
And then get over there, start like meet the team, ride practice and whatever. And half the time Scott didn't even know what they were saying because like Quebec French is quite a bit different from France French. And Yeah, road practice, like, was doing okay, and they wouldn't make any changes to the bike for me. And I wasn't too comfortable with their suspension setup because we all had to share the bike. And I was off the pace a little bit from the other riders. And then me and Scott were my crew chief, were kind of fighting with them.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me an ultimatum. They were like, okay, if we make these changes for your qualifying run, will you go like 2 seconds faster? And I was like, yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I think so. And so they let us make some changes to the front suspension.
Yeah.
And ended up qualifying fastest of the 4 riders on the team.
Nice.
Yeah.
That must have felt good.
That felt really good.
Yeah. So you still, why did you, everyone got to qualify.
Everyone qualifies, and they take the top 3, the average of the top 3 times.
Okay. So, but you still didn't know if you were going to race?
Not until after qualifying.
Okay. Oh, so now you're a fast guy.
So I'm the fast guy on the team now.
And they're going to put you in.
And they put me in.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really cool.
Yeah.
What was the experience like? Because I've done one 24-hour race, and it's like, I remember, being woken up for my 2 a.m. stint, and it's like, this is Le Mans, baby. Like, this is just like Le Mans. You wake up, eat your piece of dark chocolate or whatever, drink your coffee, like, still in your suit. Like,
yeah,
really cool feeling.
Yeah, it was neat. It was crazy because I don't know how long the stints were for you in the cars, but on the bike with a small gas tank at Paul Ricard, we were like 45-minute stints.
Oh,
so
sprint.
really short.
Yeah.
Because we had a crazy long straightaway. Like, we don't run the chicane that Formula One runs on the straightaway.
Oh, really?
So we ran the full straightaway, which I think is like 1.4 or 1.5 kilometers long. And you came onto the straightaway 4th gear. So, like, we did 339 kilometer an hour down the back straight was the fastest I got clocked at.
What was the lighting like?
There was one light on the inside of every corner, on the inside curbing. That's it. And headlights. So you come onto the back straightaway, and it's complete darkness all the way around you. You see the Ferris wheels and stuff lit up from the party around the track. But the only thing you can see at the track is over a kilometer away, a light at the end of the straightaway. There's a bridge with a light at the inside of the turn, and it's just like wide open till you get there.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Huh. How'd you guys do?
We ended up 5th in class. So it was Superbike and Super Stock. So we were on a Super Stock bike, and we finished 5th in class, 9th overall.
Wow.
Yeah. But the 3rd rider on our team, he was off the pace at night. So for the entire night stint, for like whatever it was, like 8 or 9 hours of darkness, it was just me and the other rider back-to-back stints.
Right.
So I was never off the bike for more than 45 minutes at a time.
Right. That's a lot.
It was a lot. And I had never done any type of endurance racing before this.
Did you enjoy, like, your first endurance experience? Did you enjoy endurance racing? Did you get a whole new appreciation for it? Or are you like, no, I'm a sprint race type guy?
No, I loved it.
Yeah.
I came back with the mindset that I was going to get a ride in the World Endurance Championship full time.
Okay.
That was my new goal.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do.
Because it's so funny. There's so many different. It's getting closer now. Like, as I'm thinking about cars, like as cars and technology, as the cars get so much better and able to withstand like such a beating, sprint racing and endurance racing type driving is getting closer. But I always think of, the glory days of Le Mans, like in the 60s and whatever. And, the endurance racer was someone totally different than a Fangio or a Sterling Moss. Like, this was a guy who could, potentially drive 4, 6, 7, 8 hours, in a car and not break it and not overheat the brakes, and do exactly what he needed to do, read the pit board, how fast do you need to go to win the race, as slow as possible type guy. And I think endurance racing is cool, and it's like a real team deal, which I think, ultimately is more satisfying when you do well.
Yeah, it's really rewarding
Mm-hmm.
when the whole team finishes. It's like one of the most emotional experiences I've had in motorsports for sure.
Yeah, because a 45-minute race, big difference between that and a 24-hour race.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, like the highs, the lows, the changing brake calipers, changing discs, you know, thinking it's all over, coming back, and we've got a shot at it, and the guy, you know, who was leading blew up, and
it's it was a wild experience. Like, I'll never forget being like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, sleeping in the back of a cube van, getting woken up. Like, okay, you're on the bike in 5 minutes. It's like,
come out of an alternate reality dream.
Get your leathers on. Buddy comes in on the bike. They fill it up with fuel, maybe change tires, maybe change brake pads, maybe add some oil to the thing. And then you just hop on the bike and go. And within 30 seconds, you're doing 300 kilometers an hour. It's like, I was just completely sound asleep 7 minutes ago. Now I'm like, what?
Like, that sounds insane. Did throughout your whole career, you know, you had to quit racing motocross initially because of your mom. Now how, and I know she goes to the track, but how has she been as far as nerves go throughout your whole career of doing gnarly shit?
She doesn't like it. She supports it because she knows how much I love it.
How much your dad loves it.
How much my dad loves it, and it kind of it's kept me and my dad like a really tight relationship more than anything.
Yeah.
But she would always have, like, she came to the odd race, but she would never watch the race. She would just stay in the motorhome, watch live timing. If I stopped coming around on live timing, she'd put her phone away and start reading a book or something. Like, she just wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And it was she had like a peace rock, she called it. Like a rock that she would hold on to for good luck anytime I was racing. And she would hold on to it during every race that I did, whether she was there or not, watching live timing, whatever. And she said for the 24-hour races, she would go to bed and she'd put a sock over her hand with the rock in her hand, so she was holding it the whole time.
Very superstitious.
Very superstitious.
Oh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's tough. But so you did the Paul Ricard race, and then you've done Le Mans?
I did Le Mans like 2 or 3 years after.
And that's a 24-hour race?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, that's got maybe me being, you know, a race car guy like that, that would give me chills being at Le Mans.
Yeah, it's not the same circuit that the cars do for the 24-hour. Okay. It's just the closed circuit track.
Yeah.
And it's, don't get me wrong, it was a really cool experience, and like I got like a medal, like
that you did
Le Mans 24.
Yeah.
And, like it was a super cool experience. We didn't have good luck in the race, so that one was not as cool for me. But it was still a lot of fun. But I was so unprepared coming into that one. I was bummed because I had retired at the end of 2017.
Okay.
And I was done. Like, I was over it. And so it's March or April, I think. And I'm working construction. I'm putting up siding on a cottage. And I get a phone call from this same Frenchman that got me the ride at the Bull Door.
Yeah.
And they had one of their riders coming in, like, testing for Le Mans 24-hour, break his collarbone. And he's like, on Tuesday, can you fly out to France? And this was like Friday the week before.
You're finishing the last few of your McDonald's fries in the front seat.
Had not been training at all. Like, fully just like wasn't cycling, wasn't doing absolutely anything, like partying a little bit. And I was like, I don't know if you want me to come and do this race. And he's like, no, you're still young. You can do it, whatever. And I was like, okay, cool. So, yeah, flew over to do it.
But you guys broke or crashed or something?
We had a stupid electrical malfunction on the first stint of the 24-hour race, and my teammate pushed the bike like 5 kilometers or something because, like, he had to follow the access roads around the outside of the track. and then he got it in, and so we were down in like pretty close to last place at the beginning of the race.
Devastating.
So it was just like, oh, we got to go through 24 hours now, and we know we're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
That's
tough.
It was a bummer.
Huh. So you retired, but then you came back to racing the Canadian Superbike deal in like 2018 and 19. And Duncan, you got those clips. There's some freaking badass races, dude. Like you did not lose any pace.
Yeah.
And in my mind, maybe just speaking for me, but I feel like for you as well, like as I approached 30 or got right around 30, I got faster. Like I got a little bit more mature. I don't know. I feel like watching this stuff, it's like, wow, damn.
Yeah.
Same for you.
Yeah. I kind of 2018 and 2019 was pretty cool. 'Cause just doing one-off races, not doing the full championship.
Right. Okay.
So I was just like, you know what? I don't want to go out to Shubenacadie, and I don't want to race at St. Eustache. I want to go do Shannonville and Mosport.
Right.
So 2018, I just did Mosport, and 2019, I did Shannonville and Mosport.
So you guys had a bike, and it's like,
Yeah, still the same bike that I raced in 2017.
right. So it just made sense to go try and win a race.
I mean, it wasn't even, let's go try to win. Like, we just wanted to go back to the track and see our friends for the most part.
Right.
Like, it was more of a social thing for me and my dad to do.
Yeah.
And then I ended up winning races both of those years.
Yeah.
Of the double headers at Mosport, I won one race, 2018, one race in 2019. And I was like, I raced this Canadian Superbike Championship on a superbike for 3 seasons, never won a race. I quit racing, come out for fun, and I win.
Yeah.
Like, why couldn't I do this when I was racing full time?
Because it was for fun.
Because it was for fun.
You're in the flow.
Yeah.
You got that? This is badass. If you go back, Duncan, to that 30 seconds, what time? You guys are doing 122s at Mosport?
120s.
120s. That's fast.
Yeah.
So on the last lap, you're running second, third?
I'm in third there, yeah.
So you're running third into the last lap.
Mm-hmm. And this one, this was 2019, right?
This is...
So the guy in front of me there, Jordan, he took me out the day before.
Look at this pass. Just boom into 5B.
Yeah, that was aggressive.
Absolutely shut the... I bet he wasn't pleased.
He was not pleased, but like I said, the day before, he took me out into turn 8. And
So
I was pretty mad.
And then going up the back straight at Mosport, you must get a whale of a draft.
Oh, yeah.
So you try into the inside of 8.
Yeah,
Don't
Sam
do
was
it.
really, really good into turn 8 that
You
year.
go through, and then...
And I was just on it, trying everything. Didn't have much tire left, as you can see there.
You nothing. And then what
And
did
then
he do? He goes
He
wide?
took the front. He
went-
made a mistake in the last corner, and then he tried to cut me off, and I just, instead of letting off the gas, I just hit him.
Well, everyone who's listening to this should go watch this on YouTube, because you absolutely picked up the throttle probably earlier than you ever have in your entire life coming out of 10, and door slammed him coming to the line and beat him. That was an insane last lap.
Yeah, that was a wild race. Yeah, so race pace 22s, I guess. Some of the guys did 21s, but qualifying with a qualifying tire were like 20.5.
That's fast. And so compared to a car, you're just way more mile an hour down the back straight.
All the speeds in a straight line on a superbike.
Right.
Like, our mid-corner speed is so slow.
Because you've got no tires.
Yeah.
As far as...
You got that much contact patch.
Right. Compared to 4 tires.
Yeah.
Right. Man. So that's just your kind of, retired racing career. Just pretty badass races at Mosport. Now you got a radical. You and your dad are still doing it.
Yeah.
Racing a full downforce race car.
Yeah. Full
Yeah.
downforce car, the motorcycle engine, so that's pretty familiar.
Is that a little bit of why you guys looked at it, or also pretty inexpensive to run? Like, you're not tearing it up. You're not...
As far
rubbing.
as, like, paying for still a relatively quick lap time, it's the cheapest way to do it.
For sure.
We're doing similar times to what you do in the NASCAR, and the car is quite a bit cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
We go through one set of tires a weekend at Mosport. It's a great little car.
Yeah, you don't spend anything on brakes.
We haven't replaced the brake pads yet.
Yeah. And yeah, you're not rubbing. You're in an aero car, like with some real downforce. And there's a bunch of guys doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty good series that FEL has put on.
How many guys do you race against? This was your first season, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did one season. And
so first season in a car or like a car, or first season in a car.
Yeah. First time ever on a track in a car was the Radical this past year.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So going from a very high level of go-kart racing to almost 20 years of not doing it, or 15 years of not doing it, now making the jump to a car, and just, it's one of those things that, I love it so much for you and your dad. Like, if you can't be a pro, you may as well be an enthusiast. And that's how I feel about so many things. And to be an enthusiast has longevity, because you're going to do it regardless of if there's a paycheck or not. It's just what you love doing on weekends. That Radical series looks like it has some longevity for you and your dad to do until, as long as you want, you can race a car and be competitive till you're 60.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. It's really cool. It's been a lot more of a steep learning curve than I expected. I don't know why I had in my head that I was just going to hop in it and be competitive right away, because I was like, oh, like all these dudes I used to race go-karts with are super competitive in cars. So
right.
but they didn't take 15 years off.
Yeah.
So, I had to learn a lot, but near the end of the season this year, we started getting a lot closer to the front. So going to put in a good effort next season to win the championship.
What'd you finish? Third in the championship?
I got third overall.
Yeah.
But I didn't podium until 3/4 of the way through the season.
Yeah, but it's going to take some learning.
Yeah.
To race a car, and then not even that, your dad being your crew chief.
Yeah.
It's going to take a minute for him to figure out how to tune on a car.
Yeah, we didn't make a single adjustment on the car all year, but
probably good though.
Yeah.
Probably good.
I learned the car, and gonna work on setup this year. Try to get it. We bought the scales and everything for it. Gonna set it up. I don't know, toe in, toe out, camber, all that car stuff. Try to learn it.
And you've got now you have 2 new go-karts.
Yeah. Thanks, Timmers and Richard.
Like I said with Daryl Timmers on the podcast, you're part of the group of the guys with the 80 shifter carts. And everyone listening to this are, go-kart guys and stuff like that. So if anyone has 80s, either sell them to us or build them up and come out and race
we'll buy all your
series.
80 stuff.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah, just picked up 2 carts with 280 motors. Got to buy a few more parts to fill in the gaps, but really excited for that.
You got to rebuild mine.
You
bought an iRacing setup, sim setup.
Yeah, I spent way too much money on my sim setup.
What do you think of it? Because I've had different feelings throughout the years. I got on iRacing in 2015 with a $200 wheel, and I only upgraded this last year.
Yeah.
What are your feelings?
On iRacing?
About iRacing in general, sim racing.
I love it.
Okay.
Whether or not it helps my driving in a car, I'm not so sure. But I know it does help, keeping you sharp, working on racecraft. And it's just so much fun. I'm just completely nerding out on it, from everything from the equipment itself to the racing to the cars. It's a whole new world for me to do. And especially I work construction, so we work long hours. It's dark before I get home. So there's not a whole lot for me to do after I get home.
Yeah.
But it's easy to hop on the sim for even just 20 minutes a night.
Yeah, and just test. Yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. right now racing like GT4 sports cars and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since talking to Kyle, I'm like, oh, sports cars are cool.
Yeah.
And they're like, you can actually kind of push them a little bit compared to a stock car or a NASCAR. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot to be gained by being a good iRacer. I mean, you look at like Morad's fast as
Look at
all get out.
Verstappen.
Yeah.
Like, he's one of the fastest sim racers in the world. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't think that's a coincidence.
No. And then even like my first, I think I had just got iRacing maybe like a month before I did that NASCAR Next deal. And we all went down there, and it was a group of all the NASCAR kids. And everyone was asking Ty Majeski about his iRacing setups, because at that point he had the first and second account in iRacing. He was like 1 and 2.
Really?
Yeah, and I didn't even know about iRacing hard. Like, I got on like the month before. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is. And everyone's just like, yo, tell me how to do this, tell me how to do that. And, the guy is clearly a wheelman and would win, tens and tens of super late model big races and every year. Yeah, again, not a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Not a coincidence at all. So, I don't know. Do you think it's the future to some degree?
I think it could be. I mean, I think about, like, I hopped in a car this year, and even though I wasn't super fast right away, like, I was still battling inside the top 10, knocking on the door of top 5 my first handful of races, where I hop on, like, just an official iRace, no matter what the class. I'm battling so hard. And, like, I'll get, like, a 10th or something. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that was a pretty good race. And then I check it out, and it's like, I'm in the 7th split. Each split has 20 people. Like, there's so many fast drivers on the sim that whether or not they have an opportunity to get in a race car ever, probably not.
Right.
So it's just, it's really neat. I listen to, like, the iRacing, like, downshift podcast now.
Oh, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And, like, just, I don't know. I think the whole sim racing thing's really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you as a kid, especially people who grew up who are our age, like right around that time, there was always this kind of like magical like hope that like video games would be real. Video games would like be very close to reality. Like, it was always like, how real could the video game be? And like, it's finally kind of really getting there as far as, if you went down to the TRD sim or the Chevy sim, like, be like, this is damn close.
Yeah. Come a long way from when we were sitting on the couch in Steffler.
Oh, yeah, we didn't
playing Formula 1 with just the controllers. We didn't even have wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Before we shut her down, you came back from Alabama and moved in with me at my university house.
That was before I went to Alabama.
Oh, before you went to Alabama.
That was before I went to Alabama, yeah. Good times.
You took a college program.
Yeah, you told me you were going in a second year, and you're like, yeah, get in the house. Paul's moving in with me. And I was like, oh, Guelph seems pretty sick. So I just got online and I checked out college programs near Guelph. Ended up doing a 1-year program just so I could come live in the house with you and the boys.
That was good.
That was a fun year.
Yeah, you even remember you bought a trials bike and we rode it around the street.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot about that bike.
Yeah,
I had a 450 in the garage there,
I remember
motocross bike for a bit, and I had that Subaru Impreza.
Oh yeah.
And I remember I completely disassembled the 450 and got it in the trunk of my Impreza.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
That was a tough garage to be working on a bike.
Yeah. Real tough.
Well, man, thanks for coming down. What else can you tell the people? Where should they follow you, your newfound car racing career, anything like that?
I'm I'm not too big into the social media thing right now, but I've got Instagram. It's Kenny Riedmann 42, and I don't post too much stuff. But
the FEL series, cool series.
Oh, the FEL series is awesome. Both like the sports car side of things and the Radical Cup side of things. They're doing some really cool things with that series, and it seems to be gaining a lot of traction, going in the right direction right now. And the end goal is to get more Canadian talent to grow and to get them racing in some bigger series.
Yeah, the good sports car stepping stone.
Yeah, a good stepping stone to like as far as like Radical is like a really good stepping stone into like an LMP3. And then they race GT4 and TCR, which you can go straight into IMSA. It's the same car, the same BOP.
Yep.
So it's really cool that there's a good homologated series now in Canada to grow some talent.
Absolutely. And you guys race 2, maybe 3 doubleheader weekends with us in the Pinty series. So if you're a race fan, come on out. Yeah. All right, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
If you guys enjoyed this, give me a rating and share it with some friends.